March 17, 1943. North Atlantic, 520 kilometers west of Iceland. The sea is black under overcast skies that hide both moon and stars. Wind drives whitecaps across swells running 4 meters high. Surface temperature hovers just above freezing. In these conditions, a man in the water dies in 15 minutes. A ship sinks in 5. And a submarine hunting convoy, SC-122, has just made a fatal tactical error. Unterseeboot 537, a Type 7C U-boat commanded by Kapitan Lieutenant Werner Hartmann, runs submerged at periscope depth, tracking a merchant convoy silhouetted against the marginally lighter western horizon. Through the periscope, Hartmann counts 14 ships, 8 freighters, 4 tankers, 2 escorts. The escorts are corvettes, small anti-submarine vessels armed with depth charges, but too slow to catch a properly handled U-boat. This should be a textbook attack. Surface under darkness, race ahead of the convoy, submerge again, wait for targets to steam into torpedo range, fire, dive deep, escape. Hartmann has done this 47 times across 9 war patrols. He's sunk 21 Allied ships totaling 89,000 tons. He's survived 16 depth charge attacks, 3 air attacks, and 1 ramming attempt by a British destroyer that missed by less than 30 meters. He's one of the Kriegsmarine's most experienced commanders. Careful, methodical, aware that the North Atlantic in March 1943 is becoming a U-boat graveyard. Allied technology is improving. Radar, sonar, air patrols. The hunting is getting harder, but tonight looks favorable. Limited visibility, rough seas that mask periscope wakes. A lightly defended convoy. Hartmann makes his decision. Surface. All ahead full. We'll run ahead of the convoy and be in position by 0300 hours. U-537 rises from the black water like a surfacing whale. Seawater cascades from the conning tower. Hartmann climbs through the hatch, followed by 3 lookouts. The wind hits him immediately, cold enough to numb exposed skin in seconds. He raises his binoculars and scans the horizon. The convoy is 7 kilometers to the northeast, barely visible as darker shapes against darkness. The escorts are on the convoy's flanks, their positions marked by occasional phosphorescence in their wakes. Nobody is looking this direction. The diesels roar to life. The U-boat surges forward, making 18 knots on the surface, racing to get ahead of the convoy. Standard doctrine, standard tactics. Everything by the manual that's kept Hartmann alive through 2 years of war. What Hartmann doesn't know, what his lookouts can't see in the darkness and spray, is that 1,700 meters to the south, Petty Officer Thomas Brennan is watching U-537 through binoculars from the deck of HMS Campion, a Flower-class corvette that's supposed to be escorting the convoy, but has fallen behind due to engine problems. Brennan isn't supposed to be on deck. He's supposed to be in the engine room, helping repair a failed fuel pump. But Brennan is a watchmaker from Dublin who spent 20 years building clocks before the war, and he's just seen something impossible. A light. Brief. Rhythmic. Barely visible. Flashing in a pattern that Brennan's clockmaker brain recognizes instantly. Not random. Not natural. Mechanical. Something blinking on and off with the regularity of a gear train. Precisely timed. Absolutely consistent. He's looking at a surfaced U-boat running dark, except someone aboard has activated a device that's producing infrared light in a specific pattern, and through a quirk of atmospheric conditions and Brennan's position relative to the light source, he can see it. The infrared is refracting through sea spray, becoming briefly visible in the exact wavelength that human eyes can just barely detect. Brennan has no idea he's seeing infrared. He just knows he's seeing a light where there shouldn't be one, and his 20 years of building precision timepieces tells him exactly what that pattern means. It's a signal, an automated beacon, something designed to guide other U-boats to this position. He's wrong about the beacon. What he's actually seeing is a fault in U-537's experimental FUMO radar detector, a device that's supposed to warn the crew when Allied radar is painting them. The detector has a faulty indicator lamp that's bleeding infrared light through a cracked lens assembly, creating a pulse that matches the radar sweep frequency it's designed to detect. It's not a signal, it's a malfunction. But Brennan doesn't know that. He sees a pattern, and pattern recognition is what kept him employed as Dublin's premier clockmaker for 2 decades. Brennan makes a decision. He doesn't report to the bridge. He doesn't alert the officer of the watch. He runs to his workstation in the engine room, grabs his toolkit, and starts building something that should be impossible on a warship in the middle of the North Atlantic during combat operations. He's going to build a decoy, a fake U-boat signal, a mechanical device that replicates the exact pattern he just observed, amplified, and positioned to lure Hartman into making a fatal tactical error. Brennan has 4 hours until dawn, the tools in a corvette's engine room, and 20 years of experience building devices that tick, flash, and operate with mechanical precision. Nobody knows he's doing this. Nobody authorized it. By every regulation in the Royal Navy Handbook, what Brennan is about to do constitutes destruction of naval property, unauthorized modification of ship's equipment, and insubordination. If it fails, he'll face court-martial. If it succeeds, U-537 and her crew of 44 men will surface at exactly the wrong moment, in exactly the wrong position, where HMS Campion's 4-inch deck gun can put shells through her pressure hull before Hartman realizes he's been tricked by a Dublin watchmaker with a soldering iron and an understanding of timing mechanisms. The convoy plows eastward through heavy seas. 14 merchant ships carrying food, ammunition, aircraft parts, and 10,000 tons of aviation fuel. Destination: Liverpool. Cargo critical to Britain's survival. The ships steam in columns, maintaining station despite conditions that make every helmsman's job a nightmare. The corvettes patrol the flanks, their ASDIC sonar pinging into the darkness, listening for the distinctive return echo of a submerged submarine. Commander James Whitfield stands on HMS Campion's bridge, exhausted, frustrated, and acutely aware his ship is out of position. The fuel pump failure has cost them 4 hours. They're 15 kilometers behind the convoy, struggling to catch up, effectively useless as escorts. If U-boats attack tonight, Campion won't be there to help. Whitfield is 41 years old, a merchant marine officer recalled to naval service in 1939. He knows the North Atlantic intimately. 30 years at sea, first as an able seaman, then third mate, eventually captain of a refrigerated cargo ship running the South America route. When war came, the Admiralty needed experienced officers for the corvette program. Whitfield volunteered, underwent compressed naval training, and received command of Campion in April 1941. He's fought this ship through 14 convoy escort missions, lost count of the depth charge attacks, watched 16 ships sink, burning oil spreading across the water, survivors screaming in the darkness. The North Atlantic in winter is hell. The North Atlantic in winter with U-boats hunting is hell, with a statistical probability of death calculated in percentage points per voyage. Whitfield's standing orders are simple: protect the convoy, kill submarines, don't get killed. Tonight he's failing at the first objective. Can't protect a convoy when you're 15 kilometers astern with engine problems. The engineering officer assures him they'll have the fuel pump repaired within the hour. Whitfield doesn't believe it. Naval engineering officers are optimists by necessity. Reality is usually different. "Sir." The voice comes from behind him. Whitfield turns to see Petty Officer Brennan, covered in grease, holding what appears to be a modified signaling lamp attached to a wooden frame. "Brennan, you're supposed to be repairing the fuel pump." "Hydraulics specialist is handling that, sir. I've been working on something else." I need authorization to mount this on the aft deck and connect it to ship's power. Whitfield stares at the contraption. It looks like someone built a lighthouse mechanism in miniature, complete with rotating mirrors, a partially disassembled electric lamp, and what appears to be a clockwork timing mechanism salvaged from somewhere. What is that? A decoy, sir. I observed a surfaced U-boat 90 minutes ago, 1,700 meters south, running dark but showing an intermittent light signature. I believe it's a recognition signal for other boats. If I can replicate that signal with sufficient intensity and position it to appear as though it's coming from a different bearing, we might be able to lure the U-boat into surfacing in a position where we have tactical advantage. Whitfield processes this. You saw a U-boat 90 minutes ago and didn't report it. Correct, sir. By the time I'd have reported, climbed to the bridge, convinced you I wasn't seeing things, and organized a response, the U-boat would have moved. Instead, I built this. You built a decoy in 90 minutes in an engine room, using what resources exactly? Signaling lamp from the damage control locker, timing mechanism from the ship's chronometer I disassembled, mirrors from the officer's head, wooden frame from ammunition crate. The timing mechanism is calibrated to replicate the exact pulse pattern I observed. Duration 2.4 seconds on, 3.7 seconds off. Consistent over a 30-minute observation period before the U-boat moved out of visual range. Whitfield should order Brennan to his quarters under arrest for destroying ship's equipment. Should report this to the convoy commodore. Should follow procedure. Instead, he asks, "How do you know the pattern matters?" "I'm a watchmaker, sir." Was, before the war. Built precision timepieces for 20 years. Timekeeping is about patterns, regularity. When I see something flashing with that degree of consistency, I know it's mechanical, not random. If it's mechanical, someone built it for a purpose. If the U-boat is displaying that pattern, either deliberately or through equipment malfunction, other U-boats might recognize it. If we can replicate it and position the apparent source appropriately, we create a false signal. To what end? U-boats communicate with each other, sir. Share targeting information. If Hartman, assuming that's who we're dealing with, thinks he's seeing a sister boat in a specific location, he might surface to coordinate wolfpack tactics. They used them extensively in 41 and 42. If we can make Hartman think there's another U-boat south of his position, he surfaces to join the attack. And surfaces in range of our deck gun. Precisely, sir. Whitfield looks at the contraption again. It's insane. Unauthorized. Completely outside doctrine. It also makes a certain desperate sense. Campion is too far behind to help the convoy. If a U-boat is positioning for attack, conventional response is impossible. They can't reach the convoy in time. Can't provide effective escort, but if they can lure the U-boat to them, change the engagement geometry, maybe they accomplish something other than limping along uselessly. Mount it. Aft deck. You have 30 minutes. If this doesn't work, you're facing court-martial for destroying the ship's chronometer. Understood, sir? If it does work, then I'll recommend you for a commendation and buy you a pint in Liverpool. Brennan grins and disappears toward the aft deck. Whitfield returns his attention to the horizon. Somewhere out there, U-537 is maneuvering into attack position. Somewhere out there, 14 merchant ships are steaming into danger. And on Campion's aft deck, a Dublin watchmaker is about to test whether 20 years of building clocks translates into tactical deception against one of Germany's most experienced submarine commanders. The thing about watchmaking is precision, not approximate, not close enough, absolute precision. A mechanical watch has approximately 130 components. Each component must be manufactured to tolerances measured in hundredths of a millimeter. The escapement mechanism, the heart of the watch that regulates timekeeping, must tick with absolute consistency. 1 tick per second, 86,400 ticks per day. 3,157,600 ticks per year. If the escapement is off by even 0.1%, the watch loses 90 seconds per day. After a month, it's 45 minutes wrong. Useless. Thomas Brennan learned precision from his father, who learned it from his father, who learned it from a Swiss master in Geneva in 1870. The Brennan family has been building watches since 1875. Thomas was apprenticed at age 12, spent 6 years learning to file metal by hand, cut gears with a jeweler's saw, assemble components under magnification. By age 20, he could build a complete watch movement from raw materials. By age 30, he was Dublin's premier watchmaker, charging fees that made wealthy clients complain while paying anyway, because nobody else could repair a Breguet or Patek Philippe properly. When war came in 1939, Brennan was 37 years old, married, 2 children, exempt from conscription due to reserved occupation status. Watchmakers were needed for maintaining military chronometers, artillery timing mechanisms, torpedo clocks. He could have spent the war in a workshop in Dublin, safe, building timing devices for other men to use in combat. He enlisted instead. Joined the Royal Navy in October 1940, trained as an engineering specialist, and volunteered for corvette duty because corvettes were small, uncomfortable, and desperately needed anyone with mechanical aptitude. The Admiralty sent him to HMS Campion in March 1941. He's been aboard 2 years, 8 months, 14 days. Has survived 9 U-boat attacks, 2 storms that should have sunk the ship, and countless hours in an engine room that reaches 40 degrees Celsius when the boilers are running hard. His watchmaking tools went to the bottom of the Atlantic in May 1941, when a U-boat put a torpedo through a freighter carrying Brennan's personal effects. He rebuilt his toolkit from salvaged materials, jeweler's screwdrivers made from machined steel rod, files cut from damaged saw blades, magnifying lens salvaged from a broken sextant. In 2 years, he's repaired 37 chronometers, 14 torpedo timers, 6 fire control mechanisms, and 1 submarine detection clock that the engineering officer insisted was beyond repair. Brennan fixed it in 4 hours, using a spring from a ballpoint pen and a gear cut from a shilling coin. Now, on the aft deck of HMS Campion, he's building something entirely different. Not a timepiece, a weapon. A psychological weapon that exploits the fact that submarine commanders trust patterns because patterns imply intelligence, communication, coordination. The device is simple in concept, a light source that pulses in a specific rhythm, 2.4 seconds on, 3.7 seconds off, repeated indefinitely. But achieving that rhythm with absolute precision requires a timing mechanism. Brennan has built it from Campion's main chronometer, a precision instrument that cost the Royal Navy £200 and is supposed to be untouchable by anyone below commissioned officer rank. Brennan disassembled it 40 minutes ago. Court-martial offense. He's extracted the escapement, remounted it in a wooden frame, and connected it through a series of levers to an electrical contact that interrupts power to the signaling lamp. The escapement ticks at 1-second intervals. Brennan has adjusted the lever ratios to create the required timing. The lamp stays on for 2.4 ticks, off for 3.7 ticks. The pattern repeats. The mechanism is crude but accurate. Brennan tests it with his pocket watch, counting ticks. The timing holds within 0.1 seconds over a 30-minute run. Good enough. The lamp itself is a standard Royal Navy signaling lamp, 12 volts, 200 watts, normally used for Morse code communication between ships. Brennan has modified it, removing the shuttering mechanism, installing a red filter cut from a damaged navigation light, and positioning 2 mirrors to create a beam that projects horizontally across the water rather than upward toward other ships. The mirrors are critical. Brennan observed the U-boat light at an oblique angle, meaning the light was refracting through sea spray and atmospheric moisture. To replicate that effect, he needs the decoy light to scatter similarly. The mirrors create multiple reflections that spread the beam, making it visible from many angles while keeping the source location ambiguous. He mounts the entire assembly on a swivel base salvaged from a machine gun mount, allowing him to aim the device precisely. The bearing he needs is 210 degrees relative to Campion's current heading. That positions the apparent light source south-southwest of the convoy, exactly where a U-boat might position itself for a coordinated attack with U-537. By 0215 hours, the device is operational. Brennan connects it to ship's power through a junction box in the aft deckhouse. He activates it and watches the lamp cycle. 2.4 seconds on, 3.7 seconds off. The red light pulses across the water, dimmed by the filter, scattered by the mirrors, creating exactly the effect he intends. From a distance, it will appear as an intermittent signal, mechanical in origin, consistent enough to imply deliberate communication. Whitfield arrives to inspect. It works? Well, yes, sir. Lamp is cycling correctly. Timing mechanism is holding steady. The red filter reduces intensity to approximately what I observed from the U-boat. The mirrors scatter the beam to create apparent refraction through sea spray. Effective range? Difficult to estimate, sir. Depends on atmospheric conditions, observer position, and whether the U-boat commander is looking in this direction. If Hartman surfaces again to observe the convoy, and if he's positioned where I think he is, he should see this. And interpret it as what, exactly? Another U-boat, probably U-538 or U-541. Both boats are operating in this area according to last intelligence briefing. If Hartman thinks he's seeing a sister boat signaling position, Wolfpack doctrine says he should attempt to coordinate, surface, use low-power radio to communicate, arrange a simultaneous attack. Simultaneous attack means he surfaces. Yes, sir. And if he surfaces where we want him, we have approximately 90 seconds to put shells into him before he realizes his mistake and dives. Whitfield studies the horizon. Visibility is still terrible. Wind is holding steady at 20 knots. Seas are running heavy. Perfect conditions for a U-boat attack because the corvettes can't maneuver effectively and sonar performance degrades in rough water. But also perfect conditions for deception because visual identification is nearly impossible. Active it. Maintain pattern for 60 minutes. If nothing happens by 0315 hours, shut it down and return to normal duties. Understood, sir. Brennan activates the device and adjusts the bearing. The red light begins pulsing across the black water. 2.4 seconds on, 3.7 seconds off. Mechanical, precise, bait. Aboard U-537, Captain Lieutenant Werner Hartmann is positioning for his attack. The U-boat is running on the surface, diesels driving them at 16 knots, racing ahead of the convoy. The plan is textbook. Get 5 kilometers ahead. Submerge. Wait. Let the convoy come to them. Fire 4 torpedoes from the bow tubes at the lead ships. Dive to 80 meters. Evade the inevitable depth charge attack. Surface after the escorts move past. Assess damage. If necessary, pursue for a second attack. Hartmann has done this so many times, the procedures are automatic. The entire crew knows their roles. The torpedomen are already preparing the bow tubes. The engineer is monitoring battery levels, calculating how long they can remain submerged after the attack. The radio man is listening for transmissions from BDU, U-boat command, that might provide updates on convoy routing or additional boats in the area. At 0220 hours, the radio man reports something unusual. Herr Kalu, I'm detecting a faint signal, bearing 215 degrees. Pattern is consistent with FUMO detector output. Could be another boat. Hartmann moves to the radio station. Show me. The radio man adjusts filters. Through the static and interference, there's a pattern. Brief, regular. The kind of signal the FUMO radar detector produces when Allied radar is painting a boat. But this signal is too weak to be coming from U-537's own equipment. It's coming from somewhere else. Another boat, Hartmann says. Probably U-541. Corvette Captain Brenner was assigned this patrol area. He must be positioning south of the convoy for coordinated attack. The radio operator looks skeptical. The pattern is unusual, Herr Kalu. I've never seen FUMO output that consistent. Usually there's variation, as the radar sweeps change frequency. Atmospheric interference, sea state, could be any number of factors. Hartmann makes a decision. Wolfpack tactics require coordination. If Brenner is positioning for attack, they should communicate, arrange simultaneous strikes to overwhelm the escorts. All stop. Prepare low-power radio transmission. I want to contact U-541 and coordinate our attacks. The diesels throttle back. U-537 slows, wallowing in the heavy seas. Hartmann climbs to the conning tower with his radioman. They deploy the low-power radio antenna, a wire strung between the periscope shears and the Wintergarten, the platform behind the conning tower. The radioman begins transmitting. Short burst, encoded, asking for position, confirmation, and attack timing. No response. They wait 5 minutes. Transmit again. Still no response. Hartmann frowns. If Brenner is maintaining radio silence, he won't respond until he's ready to coordinate. But the signal is still there, bearing 215 degrees. Regular pattern, definitely mechanical in origin. Helmsman, come to course 215. Ahead slow. We'll close the distance and attempt visual identification. This is exactly what Brennan was hoping for. U-537 turns toward HMS Campion, closing at 8 knots, expecting to find a friendly boat. Instead, they're motoring directly toward a corvette whose crew has been tracking their position since the decoy activated and whose 4-inch deck gun is already loaded, trained, and waiting for a target to present itself. The geometry of the trap is elegant. U-537 is approaching from the north. HMS Campion is positioned to the south, with the decoy light mounted on the aft deck projecting toward the submarine. From Hartmann's position, the light appears to be south-southwest of his boat, which matches where he'd expect to find another U-boat positioning for a flank attack on the convoy. What Hartmann doesn't realize is that the light is actually much closer than he estimates. Distance estimation at night over water is notoriously difficult. The human eye judges distance based on the apparent size and brightness of objects. In darkness, with no reference points, estimates can be off by 50% or more. Hartmann thinks the signal is 5 or 6 kilometers away. Actually, it's less than 3. At 0240 hours, Hartmann sees something that changes everything. Through his binoculars, he catches a glimpse of a shape, too large to be a U-boat conning tower, too angular. It's a ship, a warship, and it's positioned exactly where he thought he was seeing a friendly boat. Alarm! Dive! Dive! The response is immediate. Klaxons blare. Lookouts drop through the tower hatch. Hartmann follows, dogging the hatch behind him. Vents open. Ballast tanks flood. U-537's bow tilts downward as the boat begins its emergency dive. But they're too close. 3 kilometers? The corvette has visual contact, and the 4-inch gun crew has been waiting for exactly this moment. HMS Campion's gunnery officer, Lieutenant Peter Hammond, has been tracking the U-boat's approach through binoculars for 18 minutes. He's watched the submarine maneuver closer, clearly investigating the decoy signal. Hammond is 24 years old, a mathematics graduate from Cambridge who joined the Royal Navy in 1940. He's fired Campion's deck gun in anger 12 times across 2 years of convoy duty. His hit rate is 38%, which sounds terrible, until you realize that hitting a target from a moving ship in heavy seas at night is nearly impossible. Tonight, he has advantages. The target is closing, range is decreasing. The U-boat is presenting a stable profile, moving slowly, apparently unaware they're being tracked. Hammond has had time to calculate range, windage, and deflection. His gun crew is ready. 2 rounds loaded, high explosive, fused for contact detonation. When Hartman begins his emergency dive, Hammond has approximately 40 seconds before the submarine is too deep to hit. The conning tower will be underwater in 30 seconds. The pressure hull will be below 10 meters, relatively safe from shell impacts, in 45 seconds. Hammond gives the order. Target bearing 330, range 2800 meters. Fire when ready. The 4-inch gun barks. The shell arcs across the darkness, trailing phosphorescence. The trajectory is nearly flat at this range. Flight time, 1.8 seconds. The shell impacts U-537's conning tower precisely as the top of the structure disappears below the surface. The high explosive detonates against reinforced steel, blowing a hole through the tower's plating, sending shrapnel into the boat's interior. Hammond's crew reloads in 6 seconds. The gun barks again. This round impacts near the forward diving plane, punching through the outer hull, flooding the forward trim tank. U-537's dive becomes uncontrolled. The bow drops steeply. Inside the boat, men are thrown against bulkheads. Emergency lights flicker. Water pours through the damaged tower, cascading down the conning tower trunk into the control room. Hartman is screaming orders. Blow forward ballast tanks. All back full. Level the boat. The engineer fights to restore trim. High-pressure air roars into the damaged tanks, trying to expel water, trying to restore buoyancy. But the forward trim tank is holed. Air bubbles out through the shell damage as fast as they pump it in. The boat continues to sink, bow down at 30 degrees, descending through 20 meters, 30, 40. At 55 meters, the pressure hull groans. U-boats are designed to operate at depths up to 200 meters, but U-537 is diving out of control with damaged buoyancy tanks and water flooding the control room. The crew is fighting a losing battle against physics and the Atlantic Ocean. Hartman makes the hardest decision of his naval career. Surface. Emergency blow all tanks. We surface and abandon ship. It's surrender. It's survival. High-pressure air blasts into every ballast tank. U-537's descent stops. The bow rises. The boat starts climbing, accelerating, breaking surface at 02:46 hours in a surge of white water and escaping air. HMS Campion is waiting. The deck gun fires again. This round hits the pressure hull just forward of the conning tower, penetrating deep before detonating. The explosion tears through the forward torpedo room, killing 6 men instantly, rupturing 2 torpedo tubes, flooding the compartment. Hartman knows his boat is dying. Abandon ship. All hands abandon ship. Men pour from the conning tower hatch. They stumble onto the Wintergarten, the forward deck, jumping into water that will kill them in 15 minutes if they're not recovered. Some have life jackets. Some don't. Some are wounded, bleeding into the water, screaming. Whitfield watches from Campion's bridge. He's fought U-boats for 2 years but never actually sunk one. Never watched men die in the water. It's different from abstract warfare. It's immediate, visceral, terrible. Ceasefire. Launch boats. Recover survivors. The deck gun falls silent. Campion's crew launches the ship's motor whaler and a life raft. The boats move toward the sinking U-boat, toward men thrashing in the freezing water. The rescue is chaotic. U-537 is going down by the bow, sinking faster as flooding spreads through damaged compartments. Men are jumping from the tilting hull, swimming desperately toward the rescue boats. Brennan watches from the aft deck, his decoy light still pulsing meaninglessly into the darkness. 2.4 seconds on, 3.7 seconds off. The mechanism that lured 44 men into a death trap continues its mechanical rhythm, indifferent to the consequences. The U-boat slides beneath the surface at 02:53 hours. The bow goes first, tilting vertical, the stern rising, the propellers spinning uselessly in air. Then the entire boat vanishes in a surge of bubbles and wreckage, men still aboard, trapped in flooded compartments or too wounded to escape, go down with the boat. The pressure hull will implode somewhere around 400 meters depth, crushing anything still inside. HMS Campion recovers 22 survivors, 22 men from a crew of 44. Werner Hartmann is among them, unconscious, wounded by shrapnel, pulled from the water by Brennan himself, who dove into the Atlantic without thinking, without hesitation, just reacted to seeing a man drowning. They wrap the survivors in blankets, give them hot tea, treat their wounds. The German sailors are silent, shocked, traumatized. Some are crying. Some just stare. They're prisoners now, but before that, they're men who watched their ship die and their shipmates drown. Whitfield finds Brennan in the engine room an hour after the sinking. Brennan is disassembling his decoy device, carefully separating components, trying to rebuild the chronometer he destroyed to create the timing mechanism. "Leave it," Whitfield says. "I'll tell them the chronometer was damaged during the action. Nobody needs to know. I destroyed naval property, sir. You sank a U-boat. The Admiralty will give you a medal, not a court-martial. 22 men drowned because I built a machine that lied to them." Whitfield sits on an equipment crate. 22 men drowned because they were hunting convoy SC-122, trying to sink ships carrying food to Britain. This is war, Brennan. We don't get to choose clean outcomes. I'm a watchmaker, sir. I build things that keep time. I built something that killed people. You built something that saved a convoy. 14 ships, 10,000 tons of cargo, 200 merchant sailors who would have died if that U-boat had attacked. You made a choice. It was the right choice. Brennan doesn't respond. He continues disassembling the device, his hands moving with the precision of 2 decades building timepieces, separating components, organizing them, trying to restore order to something he deliberately broke. Convoy SC-122 reaches Liverpool on March 23, 1943. All 14 ships arrive safely. The cargo is unloaded: food, ammunition, aircraft parts, fuel. The merchant crews disperse to shore leave, unaware that a corvette fell behind with engine problems, that a watchmaker built a decoy from salvaged parts, that a U-boat died because its commander trusted a pattern that seemed mechanical and therefore trustworthy. HMS Campion's action report is filed on March 25th. Commander Whitfield writes, "During night action on 17 March 1943, this vessel engaged and sank U-boat by gunfire. The engagement was made possible by innovative use of signal deception developed by Petty Officer Thomas Brennan, whose technical expertise created tactical advantage against superior enemy forces. Recommend Brennan for commendation." The Admiralty awards Brennan the Distinguished Service Medal in May 1943. The citation reads, "For exceptional skill and initiative in developing tactical deception methods, resulting in the destruction of enemy submarine." Brennan receives the medal at a ceremony in Portsmouth, stands at attention while an admiral pins medal to his chest, and returns to HMS Campion the same day because the ship is sailing with the next convoy. He never builds another decoy, never speaks about the action except when directly asked. When the war ends in 1945, he returns to Dublin, reopens his watch shop, and spends the next 30 years building timepieces with the same precision he learned as a boy. Werner Hartmann survives the war as a prisoner, returns to Germany in 1947, writes a memoir in 1958 that includes a chapter about the sinking of U-537. He describes the mysterious signal that lured him to surface, the trap that destroyed his boat, the men who drowned. He never learns that the signal was fake, built by a watchmaker in 90 minutes from salvaged parts. He dies in 1986, believing he was deceived by another U-boat whose identification signal was captured and replayed by British intelligence. The truth remains classified until 1993, when the Royal Navy releases wartime records. A naval historian researching convoy actions discovers Brennan's report, realizes what happened, and publishes a paper titled Tactical Deception in Anti-Submarine Warfare. The Brennan Decoy. The paper notes that no other similar deception was attempted during the war, making U-537's sinking unique. Thomas Brennan dies in 1981, age 79, in his workshop in Dublin, surrounded by the tools of his trade. His obituary in the Irish Times mentions his naval service briefly, focuses instead on his reputation as Ireland's finest watchmaker. His children donate his tools to a museum. Among the collection is a small wooden frame containing gears and levers, labeled in Brennan's handwriting. Timing mechanism, experimental, March 1943. The museum curator has no idea what it is, files it with other miscellaneous items. The device that sank U-537 sits in a museum storage room, unrecognized, gathering dust. A machine built to lie with mechanical precision. A weapon constructed from clockwork and desperation. Proof that sometimes the most devastating innovations come not from engineers or tacticians but from craftsmen who understand that precision, timing, and pattern recognition can be weaponized as effectively as explosives. One man, one night, one device built in 90 minutes that changed the outcome of a single engagement in a war, measured in millions of deaths and thousands of ships lost. The mathematics are brutal. 22 men died. Perhaps 200 were saved. The arithmetic suggests success, but Brennan never calculated it that way. He counted ticks, seconds, the precise interval between light pulses. 2.4 seconds on, 3.7 seconds off. The rhythm of deception. The mechanical heartbeat of a lie that killed men who trusted patterns. Hartman wasn't stupid. He was experienced, methodical, careful enough to survive 2 years of war in the most dangerous service in the German military. He made a tactical decision based on reasonable interpretation of available information. The signal appeared mechanical. Mechanical signals don't occur randomly. Therefore, the signal indicated another U-boat. The logic was sound. The conclusion was fatal. This is what Brennan understood instinctively. Humans trust mechanical precision because mechanical precision is rare in nature. A light that flashes with absolute regularity must be manufactured, must be deliberate, must mean something. Brennan weaponized that trust. The British Admiralty studied Brennan's innovation, concluded that the success was unrepeatable, too dependent on specific circumstances. They were wrong, not about repeatability, but about the underlying principle. Pattern recognition as weapon, deception through precision. Modern electronic warfare, radar spoofing, GPS jamming, decoy transmitters all descended from this concept. Make the enemy trust a pattern, exploit that trust. Brennan never knew he'd invented a principle. He thought he'd built a one-off solution to an immediate problem. The theoretical implications didn't interest him. He was a craftsman, not a theorist. Hartman's memoir, published in 1958, includes harsh self-criticism. He blamed himself for trusting the signal without confirmation. He never considered the possibility that it was deliberately manufactured. Never imagined a watchmaker with a soldering iron could outthink a submarine commander with 2 years combat experience. He spent 40 years believing he made a fatal error in judgment, never learning he'd been deceived by something no doctrine had prepared him for. When Brennan died in 1981, age 79, his workshop contained 12 unfinished timepieces. Among his donated tools, a museum curator filed a small wooden frame with gears and levers, labeled Timing Mechanism, Experimental, March 1943. She had no context for what she was looking at. The device sat unrecognized for years until a naval historian cross-referenced dates and after-action reports. Now it sits in a glass case. Naval innovation in anti-submarine warfare. Visitors walk past, read the description, move on. Few grasp what they're seeing. A weapon that killed through precision. A machine that weaponized trust. Brennan's medal sits in a drawer in his daughter's house in Dublin. She doesn't display it. Her father never explained what he did to earn it. Just said he served on corvettes during the war, came home, reopened his shop. The last watch Thomas Brennan built remains unfinished in the museum collection. The escapement is installed, calibrated, functional. The gear train is incomplete. He died before finishing it. It sits in storage next to the timing mechanism from March 1943. Two devices. One designed to measure time honestly. One designed to lie with mechanical precision. Both built by the same hands. Both testimony to the fact that skill is neutral, tools are neutral, precision is neutral. Intent determines whether craft builds or destroys. Brennan chose to build something that destroyed, made that choice knowing the consequences, lived with those consequences for 40 years, never regretted it publicly, never celebrated it privately. Just returned to his workshop and spent decades creating devices that ticked honestly, measured time accurately, never pretended to be something they weren't. 2.4 seconds on, 3.7 seconds off, the rhythm that killed 22 men, the pattern that saved 200, the precision that changed one night in the North Atlantic. Forever ticking in memory, mechanical and precise, indifferent to the consequences of its own accuracy.